Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Billy Baldwin to the podium.
Well, that was cool to have John Irving here. It's also cool that he's writing the screenplay of Dan's life story, obviously focusing mostly on his wrestling career, but I'm sure that'll involve some other dramatic elements from his life as well. Thank you for having me today. I now live out on the West Coast for the first time. I lived in the New York area, grew up on Long Island, wrestled in high school on Long Island. Back in the 70s, I attended Binghamton University when it was a Division III wrestling program from 81 to 85. My coach was Steve Erber, who's now an assistant athletic director at Cornell University. And I lived in Manhattan for 20 years, and I just moved out here because I was doing a television series. I moved out here and rented the first year because the network executives dropped the axe pretty quick, and we got hit with a writer's strike and picked up for a second season, so I was foolish enough to make a more meaningful commitment to owning a home here. And of course I bought a home and the show got canceled about 4 weeks later. So I live up in Montecito, California. I don't know if anybody knows Montecito. It's right outside of Santa Barbara, really beautiful community. And I wanted to come here and just share a couple of thoughts with you. Like I said, when I wrestled at Binghamton, it was a Division III program. They were, it was a little cyclical. It wasn't one of those programs like Brockport that was consistently, kind of dominant in Division III. They were sort of up and down. We had, our fair share of Division III All-Americans and our fair share of national champions. When I was there, I had a kid that wrestled with me. He was a 3-time SUNYAC champion, and another kid who was a national champion named Tom Pilar. So we had some good kids in the room. And then they went Division I, and I understood what the president and the athletic director were trying to do. They were trying to turn Binghamton into like a Penn State. When you tell people you went to Binghamton, they say, "Where's that, Alabama?" I'm like, "No, that's Birmingham. Binghamton is in upstate New York." And a lot of the reasons that people aren't familiar with Binghamton, it's unfortunate because academically, Binghamton is competitive academically with a school like Penn State or Virginia or Michigan or Berkeley. Not quite a Berkeley, but very competitive with one of the top state universities in the country. The president and the athletic director wanted to go Division I. They wanted to build this event center. They wanted to build a law school, and they wanted to put some money into the basketball team. And they thought the way to get the media impressions and the way to get the recognition and the branding and franchising that they thought the university deserved was through Division I sports. So they go Division I, they build this $50 million athletic facility, event center, and then they decide that they're going to do a little nip-tuck, and they decide that they float a little trial balloon to eliminate the wrestling program. Well, they, unfortunately, as you know, messed with the wrong crowd. And we put up a fight. We lost the team for a full season. And we rallied about 30 guys, or about 8 or 10 guys at the core, who rallied to fight the university, fight the president and the athletic director. And we were unsuccessful. We lost the team. And needless to say, one thing led to another. Was at the Nationals. I saw Denny Hastert at the Nationals again for like the 5th year in a row. I think the only year he missed the Nationals in the last 25 years is when we went to war in Iraq in 2002 or 2003. It was the only year he missed the NCAA tournament. We saw him the following year. We talked to him about our dilemma. He said, "Look, I've tried before, and I've been unsuccessful. I stuck my nose in there a couple times. I helped out, and it turned out that he was at a fundraiser a couple months later in Atlanta, a Bush fundraiser, and George Pataki came over with a staffer and said to him, Bush made all these promises to New York, 10 billion, 15 billion, we've only gotten 40 cents on the dollar. You're the Speaker of the House. You got to make some phone calls. You got to, rattle the cage. You got to help me out. You got to make some things happen down there." And Hastert said he'd be happy to try and do that. He was going to try. No promises. He goes, "But hold on, before you go," he goes, I got a couple things I needed." He goes, "Give me that New York list." And he had like 5 or 6 things, and one of the things on the list was the Binghamton wrestling team. So Pataki's asking for like $5 billion, and Hastert's asking for a wrestling team whose annual budget was $165,000. So, needless to say, behind the scenes, we worked with the president, the athletic director, the New York State legislature, through the influence of the chief executive of the state, George Pataki, and we were able to find a way to strike a deal. The university found the money in the budget, and not only did we have the team resurrected, but we had a budget increase. We went from $165,000 to $235,000 a year. So we really stepped in it, and you can quote me on that one because we really did. As you know, the NCAA allows 9.9 scholarships, and Binghamton is in their budget as 6.5, and the alumni provides another full scholarship. So we have 7.5 out of 9.9 scholarships, which especially in that conference with Old Dominion and Hofstra, a couple of really tough teams, makes us competitive. And the first year we had no team. After we were terminated, no team. The next year we were 0-10. The following year we were 12-12. Then we were 13 and 14, and last year we were 11 and 14. But we wrestled 9 programs that were ranked in the top 15 in the country. We wrestled Old Dominion, we wrestled Hofstra, we wrestled Iowa. I think we wrestled Iowa State, we wrestled Penn State, we wrestled Oklahoma State. We lost to Old Dominion 45 to -1. Never quite heard of that before, but apparently Josh Patterson didn't agree with one of the calls and whipped his headgear or something. We wound up losing 45 to -1. But I'm happy to say the team had its first Division I All-American. This is a real happy ending and a real success story. We were 13 and we were 11 and 14. We had our first Division I All-American. Josh Patterson, the 67-pounder, was placed 7th in the nation last year. He's back as a senior, and we have a couple of really tough redshirt freshmen that are back as after sitting the year out last year, and we have 2 or 3 really tough recruits that have come in this year that are going to help the program. So it's well on its way to. And what's beautiful about this is that you could really take a Division I program, and if you have the right coach and the right support, you can really rebuild a program and turn things around rather quickly. You can do it in 3-4 seasons if you, again, with the right coach, the right funding, and the right support, and a good recruiter. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about Binghamton and what we did, and I wanted to share with you what I think we need to do here. Really simple stuff. I was frustrated when we were trying to rally the troops for the Binghamton. I literally went around the NCAA tournament with a notepad and went to people that I recognized. And I went to the World Championships in New York City with a notepad, and I went to the dinner at the New York Athletic Club with a notepad, and I got Lee Kemp and Kenny Monday and Rulon Gardner and everybody that I can get my hands on, Bruce Baumgartner. I got all their names, all of their contact numbers, and all of their email addresses. And I really wanted to. Donald Rumsfeld was there, of course. Dennis Hastrick was there, and I got everybody's contact information. And I wanted to really start a real grassroots effort. I used to work on Capitol Hill. I worked in Capitol Hill for 2 years for a congressman who represented the district where I lived in New York on Long Island, a guy named Tom Downey. And one thing that really resonated with me is when you would look at the polling in a certain policy area. You would get, for example, pro-choice or something. I mean, they had these tests, these polls that said like 79% of the population was supportive of a woman's right to choose. Odd analogy here, but I'll make my point. But the congressman, for every letter he got that was pro-choice, he got 150 letters that were pro-life. Even though, according to the statistics, 20% of the country was opposed to a woman's right to choose. Again, odd analogy, but so in a way that you could use that and spread that across all of the policy spectrum. A lot of there's certain political facets of the political landscape that are very, very mobilized. They're very, very vocal. They're very, very organized. They're very, very passionate. And part of my frustration was when I was trying to get people mobilized in the wrestling community, a lot of the usual suspects stepped up, but we have to figure out a way to be communicating our message much better and much more effectively and much more efficiently. We have to mobilize better. We have to utilize the media better. We have to utilize the stars of our community better. And we are doing pretty well, but we're not doing well enough. It's a tough economy right now, so to ask somebody to write a check for $1,000, I know that because I raise money for the Binghamton wrestling team every year. To raise $1,000 for the wrestling team at Binghamton, it's a lot tougher in this economy the last year and a half. But to get people to send an email or to get people to write a letter should not be that difficult. And when we have a program that's being threatened, we want to find ways to work with the university, to work with the trustees, to work with the president, to work with the athletic director, to work with the athletic department, with the head coach. And we want to try and find ways to do this, again, effectively, efficiently, but harmoniously, too. And I experienced some frustration. Again, this is 6-7 years ago when we saved the Binghamton team. But we really have to find a way through, for example, the Matt.com or something. Somebody took an email that I posted, that I sent to somebody. Somebody gave it to the Matt.com, and fortunately, the Matt.com published my email, my solicitation to the wrestling community. Fortunately, they posted. Unfortunately, they included my return email address. So to this day, I get a lot of fledgling actors and screenwriters that wrote this screenplay with me in mind. And so I just think we got to get the word out. The head coach at Binghamton right now, Pat Papalizio, is constantly ingraining into the minds, into the culture in the wrestling room, that when you're done here, you're not done here. You're coming back, you're giving back. In the first 5, 6, 7 years, you won't hit your peak earning potential. But when you're 28, 30, 32, 35, 38, and the checks start rolling in, you can't forget this university, you can't forget this athletic department and this wrestling program, and you can't forget the sport of wrestling. You have to give back. And if it's a form of a check for $50 or a check for $500, or if it's writing a letter, we have to get better about mobilizing and organizing. I mean, where is there a subculture? Where is there a community in this country where people are more passionate and more enthusiastic than there is in the... I mean, go to the NCAA tournament. I go to the NCAA tournament every year. You'll never find a fraternity that is... I mean, John Irving has a quote about how being involved with the world of wrestling brings him more joy than virtually anything else in his life, including his writing. I feel the same way. I'll be honest with you. I was in the shrink this week. Went to a shrink appointment, and I was sitting there talking to the shrink, and we started talking about wrestling. And he's like, "Go on with this whole thing." So keep going. And I was there for an hour, and I talked about wrestling the whole time. He's like, and I said, "Yeah, I might go back to New York, and then I'm going to go see some buddies that I wrestled with on Long Island and New York City, and I'm going to go visit my mom in Syracuse, and then I'm going to swing down through Binghamton, see the coach, and visit the guys in the room and hang out there for a couple days." He goes, "I've never seen you with a bigger smile on your face, and you have like a totally different attitude, a totally different energy." I was talking to him about Josh Patterson and the Binghamton program and going to the national tournament, and his recommendation for $250 an hour was that I take that trip and I go visit the wrestling team in Binghamton, because it seems to provide me great. You know what it really does. I wonder if you feel the same way. I'm sure that's because I'm not getting my ass handed to me on the wrestling mat anymore. But sometimes I get my butt handed to me with my kids, and sometimes I get it with my wife, and sometimes I get it with my career. Sometimes you get it with this tough economy, but wrestling's the gift that just keeps giving and giving and giving. And, I can tell you right now, like John said, and I'm sure Dan would agree, that wrestling, the values that were instilled in me as wrestling, mental toughness, work ethic, discipline, they've transcended the sport of wrestling, and they've provided me gifts and tools that have transcended the sport and allowed me to succeed as a dad and as a husband and as an artist in the show business community. And as an activist in my community. So I thank wrestling for that. I'm sure, again, all of you could say the same thing. And I thank you for having me come here today.